Good afternoon. I'm not Dan Saltzman, actually. I'm Doug Martin, President of the City Club. Welcome to the opening day of the 2000 election season. Just a reminder, please, to turn off your cell phones and other electronic devices. I have a few announcements to make first. Our next Friday forum, on March 17th, will be the Democratic Gubernatorial Candidates Forum with Jim Hill and Pete Sorensen. You may not have heard this, but Governor Kuligoski will not be participating. The debate will be moderated by Liz Kaufman. Before the debate, we'll begin our program early to debate and vote on the report from our Early Childhood Development Committee, and that'll begin at 11:45. Some upcoming member-led events. On Tuesday, March 14th, our Education and Human Development Issue Committee invites you to join them for a meeting with Scott Hapley, recipient of the Maxwell J. Schleifer Distinguished Service Award from Exceptional Parent Magazine and Executive Director of Insight, an organization that works with disabled youth. Next Wednesday night at 5:15, members of our City Club Research Committee that produced the Early Childhood Development Report will present their report and answer questions from City Club members at a town hall at City Club Commons. Club members are encouraged to attend the discussion to learn more about the report's findings, conclusions, and recommendations prior to our vote on that report at next week's Friday Forum. The report is now available online at the club website and will be published in this week's bulletin. Until the membership vote, the City Club of Portland does not have an official position on this report. The outcome of the vote will be reported in the bulletin and on our club website. On Thursday, March 16th, our Arts and Culture Issue Committee examines Portland's indie fashion scene when it hears from three of the field's most up-and-coming designers, including Lisa Radon, Elizabeth Dye, and Anna Blossom Cohen. As always, details on these events and other ongoing events are in your bulletin and online at our website. I'd like to introduce a new member to the club today, Donna Silverberg. Would you stand, please? Welcome, Donna. We've begun our spring membership drive, and I'd like to introduce Joe Ross to make a short remark about this campaign. Joe is an economist with Northwest Natural and has been a member of the City Club since he moved to Portland 18 months ago. Joe?
Good afternoon. Margaret Eichman, the City Club Director of Membership and Development, asked me if I would briefly speak to you about the benefits of City Club membership. As a relatively new Portland resident and City Club member of only about a year and a half, I jumped at the offer because as a person with a passion for civic engagement coming from the Washington, D.C. area, I have found the City Club to be unique in its activities. I sought an organization with high visibility and accessibility, respect within the community, and one steeped in tradition, and most importantly, one with a balanced perspective. I found this poignantly summed up on the club's website by its first secretary who said, and I quote, "No mossbacks or drones are wanted." So the club never deteriorated into a tool of special interest. In an era where issues have become so polarizing, this sounded like the right organization for me. Arriving in Portland, the City Club has allowed me to quickly get up to speed on local issues. The Friday forums have been very valuable because they address issues relevant to Portland and its citizens. It's also an opportunity to directly engage speakers. For the price of lunch, where else can you go and ask these people direct questions and put them on the spot? The standing committees are accessible to any member, and the research committees are a great way to participate in balanced research that does have an impact. I'm learning this firsthand as a member of the newly established Business Environment Research Committee. These and other club programs provide a constant flow of information which you can't hear anywhere else under one roof, from the state of the city from the mayor, to topics related to education or transportation, to candidate debates, like the one we're about to listen to today. So that's been my experience so far. For those of you who are not members, I invite you to join the City Club of Portland so that you too can begin enjoying similar experiences. Thank you.
Our sponsors this quarter who make broadcast of City Club possible are CH2M Hill, Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt, and West Coast Bank. Would you join me in thanking our sponsors? Now it's time for our debate, and I'll ask the candidates to be ready to join me at the podium here. Our moderator who will introduce the candidates, is our President-elect, Susan Hammer. Susan is a Portland attorney, mediator, and arbitrator focusing on business and employment issues. She's the immediate past president of the Board of Planned Parenthood of the Columbia-Willamette and currently serves on the Board of Trustees for Willamette University. Susan has been a member of the City Club since 1981. Susan?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Doug, for this opportunity to moderate the program today. We're here today to focus on the future leadership of the city that we love most, Portland, Oregon. The Lovejoy Fountain, which inspired the City Club's logo, carries the motto, "Good citizens are the riches of the city." Before beginning, I would like to thank these good citizens, Mr. Saltzman and Ms. Fritz, for their willingness to run for office and serve our city. This debate will have several sections. First, each candidate will give a 3-minute opening statement. A coin toss determined the order of appearance in this debate. Our timekeeper today, who's seated right down here, is Gwen Milius, a member of the City Club Board of Governors. Following the opening statements, candidates will respond to questions suggested in advance of this meeting by City Club members. A subcommittee of the City Club's program committee composed the final set of questions. These are the only questions that will be asked today. There will not be questions from the floor. We will rely upon the judgment of our distinguished panel of City Club members, seated here, to decide whether or not the questions have indeed been answered by the candidates. If 2 or more of these members raise their cards indicating that they feel a question has not been answered, I will restate the question and ask the candidates to reply again. On our panel, we have Lori Irish-Bauman, John Horvick, and Larry Hildebrand. Thank you all. Following the City Club's questions, each candidate will have the opportunity to ask 3 questions of the other. Finally, each candidate will make a 3-minute closing statement. Please be respectful of the candidates and please hold all applause until the end of the program. At this time, I'd like to introduce Amanda Fritz. Amanda Fritz was the first candidate to qualify under Portland's new voter-owned election system, having collected $1,005 donations from citizens in 90 of Portland's 95 neighborhoods. A native of England, Amanda attended Cambridge University at a time when fewer than 15% of the students were women from neighborhood high schools, and she graduated with a degree in biological sciences. She immigrated from England in 1979 and attended nursing school in Pittsburgh. Currently, she is a nurse at OHSU. She served on the Portland Planning Commission for 7 years. She spent the past 20 years organizing and advocating for Portland's neighborhoods on schools, environmental, and community issues, and in 2005 won the Spirit of Portland Community Service Award. I'd also like to introduce Dan Saltzman, who will be following Ms. Fritz with his opening statement. Dan Saltzman graduated from Cornell University, School of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and Massachusetts Institute of Technology. While in Washington, D.C., he served on the staff of then Congressman Ron Wyden before returning to Portland to work for CH2M Hill and later for his own environmental engineering firm. He was an elected member and chair of the Portland Community College Board of Directors, and he served on the Board of Host Community Development. Dan served on the Multnomah County Commission from 1993 to 1998 before being elected to Portland City Council, where he is in his 2nd term and currently overseeing Parks and Recreation, the Office of Sustainable Development, the Children's Investment Fund, and the Office of Cable and Franchise Management. We are now at the point where we'll have our opening statements. Ms. Fritz, you may begin.
Good afternoon. One of the things I've learned from 15 years of testifying in front of City Council is that 3 minutes goes very fast. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit more about who I am. As you can tell when I talk, I wasn't born in Portland, but I did get here as fast as I could. I met the love of my life working at a Salvation Army children's camp in New Jersey in 1977, moved here the day after I graduated from Cambridge, and went to nursing school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We then spent 4 years in Rochester, New York, where my husband went to medical school, and I worked a lot of overtime to put him through medical school. We did a nationwide search to find the best place in the country to raise a family and decided that Portland is it. We moved here in 1986, and Portland is the best place in the country to live and raise a family. I love Portland. I want to make it even better. I'm a nurse. I work part-time at OHSU in inpatient psychiatry. What I do as a nurse is to help people solve their problems and live happier, healthier lives. That's what I want to do on the City Council. I know how people in Portland struggle with unemployment, with homelessness, with drug and alcohol problems. We need to focus on taking care of the basic necessities in our city: family wage jobs with healthcare benefits, safe neighborhoods, help for people with problems, and good, stable schools. I'm a mother. My oldest son, Luke, is a sophomore at Western Oregon University, where he's studying to become a high school history teacher and coach football. My second son, who's here today, and my daughter are still at Wilson High School. Maxwell turned 18 this Tuesday and filled out his voter registration card before breakfast. Portland Public Schools got him into Princeton University. My daughter Allie is a full-time teenage drama queen. She's currently starring as the third servant in The Merry Wives of Windsor at Wilson. It's fantastic. You will not find a more enthusiastic supporter of the public schools in Portland. I believe in public education and its core importance to business and the community as a whole. I served on the Portland Planning Commission for 7 years. I was known for doing my homework and listening to citizen testimony and making amendments in projects in response. The Planning Commission was perfect training for the City Council without being a career politician. I know how to make citizen participation in the public process effective and meaningful. I'm the first candidate in history of Portland to qualify for voter-owned elections. I qualified in November, 3 months earlier than anyone else. I didn't take more than $5 from anyone, and I didn't take any money from people who don't live in Portland. I collected donations from 90 of the city's 95 neighborhoods. I have broad citywide community support based on the volunteer work that I've done in Portland's neighborhoods, schools, parks, and natural areas over the last 20 years.
Thank you. Time's up. Mr. Saltzman.
Thank you, and let me thank the City Club for hosting this debate, and I'd also like to recognize my mother, Marge, who's in the audience today. I especially appreciate the role the City Club plays in our civic life. The City Club provides an independent voice on important issues facing the city. The most recent example is your report on the need for major reforms of the fire and police disability retirement system. I thank you for that. I think that if you could distill my work into one word, it would be independence. From my time on the Portland Community College Board of Directors, to the Multnomah County Commission, to my service on the Portland City Council, I've been willing to stand up for things I believe are right and important. Sometimes it takes a little while for others to come around, and sometimes they don't. But my willingness to be independent has led to results that made a real difference in our community. The creation of the Children's Receiving Center, which offers a safe, welcoming place for children to stay who have been removed from their home because of abuse and neglect, is one example. Before the Receiving Center opened its doors, these children suffered trauma on top of trauma, sometimes sitting in the back of a police car for hours on end and being split up from their brothers and sisters. Also related to children is the voter-approved Children's Investment Fund, which is providing critical services to children who need them most. Early education that gets kids to school ready to learn. Mentoring and after-school programs that can mean the difference between success and failure for struggling students. And programs to reduce the epidemic of child abuse. I also stood up to the payday loan industry that victimizes low-income families and traps them in poverty, authoring Oregon's first real crackdown on their most abusive practices. We had to do this because Speaker Karen Minnis did not allow legislation to come before the last legislative session. Now, within weeks, Karen Minnis is calling for a special session on payday lending, and I hope they'll take up school funding too. And as I mentioned above, I've been willing to take on the third rail of Portland politics, the fire, police, disability, and retirement system. I especially want to thank Mayor Tom Potter, without whose courage on this issue, we wouldn't get the reform we so urgently need. And I also deeply appreciate his endorsement of my reelection. All of the things I have just mentioned would not have happened without my willingness to be independent and, yes, a little bit stubborn. But I also believe I've been able to find the right balance of independence and ability to govern, manage, and work with people to make city government more accountable and more effective. I hope I have your support for another term on the City Council. Thank you.
We now move to the portion of the program where I will ask the questions prepared in advance by City Club members. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to the question. Following each answer, the opposing candidate will have the option of a 45-second rebuttal. The candidates have not seen these questions in advance. The first question is to Mr. Saltzman. Mr. Saltzman, there is a projected $57 million shortfall in next year's Portland Public Schools budget, just to bring services up to current levels. There have been numerous suggestions about how, or even whether, that shortfall should be addressed, including a plan that was released this week that would generate $46.6 million from a variety of sources. Please tell us if you think the city should have a role in providing funding for local public schools, and if so, from what source or sources and under what conditions?
Absolutely, the City of Portland should have a role in funding Portland schools. It's one of our highest priorities. The plan that Mayor Potter released in consultation with the entire City Council is a good plan, and I support it at this point in time. We may want to tweak it a little bit, but we need to provide at least $21 million to Portland Public Schools this year from the city. And we're going to support other school districts within the city as well. Some of the sources include money we have available in this year's budget, at least $10 million, perhaps $15 million. And I also support, if we don't get the corporate kicker returned to the state so it can be returned to schools, I do support enactment of a cell phone tax that would be dedicated to school funding.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz, you may respond.
My first son entered kindergarten the year that Measure 5 passed. And so as an active PTA member and as a mother, I've been involved in the school funding issue for 16 years now. And we need to continue to fund our public schools. We can't look to Salem. We need to recognize that we need a permanent, stable, long-term, local solution. The cell phone tax might be part of it, but it's not the only answer. And we need to provide the stability to Portland's school districts, all of them, so that parents will have the confidence that the wonderful schools we have today will be there tomorrow, and that their children will be able to enter kindergarten today and to graduate in the time that they need to be able to be ready to face the careers for tomorrow.
Thank you. The next question is to Ms. Fritz. Ms. Fritz, recently, both the Independent Review Committee, chartered by City Council, and City Club agreed that in order to maintain the city's solvency, we need major changes in how we fund and operate the city's fire and police, disability, and retirement system. By most accounts, opposition from public unions is the biggest obstacle to reform. Do you agree with this assessment? If so, what do you propose to do about it? And what are we likely to see on the ballot this fall?
This has been a problem that has been recognized for over a decade. When Commissioner Saltzman was first being elected to the council in 1998, there was a proposal to have something on the ballot to fix the problem. And I see a new willingness from all sides to come to the table to get a mutually acceptable fix. What can't happen is a top-down decision where a city commissioner puts together a proposal and expects all the interested parties to toe the line. I'm a registered nurse and I work in psychiatry, so I'm used to being in a position where I put my life on the line, literally, that people get hurt. We have one assault a week at OHSU on average. So we need to give our public safety personnel the security that they need to be able to do their jobs, to be able to have folks coming into the system, and also to be responsible to the taxpayers and to recognize that the current system isn't working. So I'm the candidate who can bring people together to make that fix.
Okay, our panel is saying that you didn't answer the question.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Recently, both the Independent Review Committee chartered by City Council and City Club agreed that in order to maintain the city's solvency, we need major changes in how we fund and operate the city's fire and police, disability and retirement system. By most accounts, opposition from public unions is the biggest obstacle to reform. Do you agree with this assessment? If so, what do you propose to do about it? And what are we likely to see on the ballot this fall?
Actually, I think the most important impediment is the fact that Portland citizens are going to have to pay more taxes to pre-fund the system. The current system relies on property taxes each year and doesn't have an investment capacity. So in order to get to funding the unfunded liability, we need to have additional funds going into an investment fund to be able to pay for the pensions and disability that are currently on the books. So that is the challenge, is to, as well as bringing the unions and management together to find a solution.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman, you may respond.
Well, with all due respect to the police and firefighters and their unions, yes, I do agree that that is the biggest obstacle to getting reforms on the ballot. Nevertheless, the City Council has worked and committed itself now to put reforms on the November ballot, and we will vote on language by June 1st at the latest that will go to the November ballot. The language will reflect the reforms outlined in the City Club's report and in the Independent Citizen Committee that processed this issue for over a year to come up with these recommendations, and I absolutely support them. And it's not just a question of paying more taxes. The disability segment needs to be reformed. It's the fox guarding the hen house, and we need to change that.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Saltzman. Mr. Saltzman, this election involves the first test of publicly financed campaigns for city council seats. In this race, your opponent has opted to take public money for her campaign, and you have opted not to. Please tell us how you feel the use of public and private money affects how candidates campaign and ultimately govern.
Well, this is a new era in the city of Portland politics, and I'm glad to be one of the people that voted to implement voter-owned elections. I do believe it provides an important avenue, particularly for women and minority candidates, to get in office. So I think it's a great experiment. I've elected not to take public money because philosophically I'm opposed to using public money for my own campaign. But I have limited my contributions, and I've raised about the same amount of money that is available to the publicly funded candidate for the primary.
Okay, we have 2 question marks.
Okay, so.
Would you like me to repeat
Yeah,
the
repeat the
question? Okay, this election involves the first test of publicly financed campaigns for city council seats. In this race, your opponent has opted to take public money for her campaign, and you have opted not to. Please tell us how you feel the use of public and private money affects how candidates campaign and ultimately govern.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't believe, I think that there's an insinuation there that because I've opted not to take public money, that therefore I'm in the pocket of people who give me private money. I think my career, my 13 years in public office have shown that I am pretty independent and I'm capable of ticking off people who support me as well as people who do not support me. And I stand by that record.
Thank you.
Is that better? Okay.
Ms. Fritz, you may respond.
At the Mayor's Education Summit a couple of weeks ago, a fellow from the governor's office said, "I'm from the state and I'm here to help you," and everybody laughed. I think we have a problem in government when citizens don't feel they can trust their government. And part of that is that citizens should not have to wonder or worry whether campaign contributions affect the vote. Whether they do or not, elections should be clean. And public money funding my campaign, it's 30 cents from every Portland resident. When I'm elected, I will be beholden to every resident in Portland, not to special interests, not to the people who have contributed to my campaign, because everybody will have contributed to my campaign.
Please hold your applause. Thank you. Question to Ms. Fritz. City Council's report on affordable housing in Portland recommends the creation of long-term rental vouchers to be funded in part by a new real estate transfer tax. To what extent do you support these recommendations, and how would you work to increase funding for affordable housing?
Yes, I support the City Club's recommendations, especially the real estate transfer tax, which of course we need to get a change at the state level to be able to do that. And I support the real estate transfer tax specifically targeted for affordable housing. I like taxes that have a nexus between the purpose of the tax and the way that we raise it. Another way that we could and should do it is to set aside 30% of urban renewal money to go to affordable housing. If we had set aside only 20% of urban renewal money for the last 5 years, we would have had $63 million for affordable housing. So that's what California does. That's what we can do.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman, you may respond.
I also support the City Club's recommendations. I think what we need to have is the state legislature give the metro area the option of having a local real estate transfer tax. I think that's the most feasible way to get there, and Commissioner Sten can well testify to that effort. But I do believe we have a housing investment fund, we have urban renewal funds, and we are investing a lot in affordable housing these days. And that doesn't mean there's more not to be done. But we also provide tax credits for first-time homeowners, single-family residences. And I think that's an important program that we have in place as well.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Saltzman. Mr. Saltzman, Portland has a well-regarded park system because of forethought by city founders who set aside land for parks while the city was growing, knowing that they would otherwise lose the land to development. What is the city doing to secure land for the future in areas that are underserved and rapidly growing, such as East County?
Great question. When Mayor Potter assigned me the Parks Bureau last July, I immediately announced that my 2 priorities for the Parks Bureau, one of them is to be opportunistic to acquire new lands for parks, recreation centers, and community and natural areas as the opportunities present themselves. And even if we can't afford to turn them into parks or recreation centers now, we ought to be purchasing the land and holding on to it for the future to maintain the legacy and the commitment of those who had the foresight in front of us. So far, we have acquired many, many acres of parklands. Just last week, we doubled the size of Sacagawea Park with a 4-acre property donation. A few months ago, we received over 100 acres of natural area near the Columbia Slough, which are going to be available. So it's one of my 2 top priorities as Parks Commissioner to do that. The other one is to maintain our resources and to invest in infrastructure and tackling our deferred maintenance backlog.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz, you may respond.
We need to have some broader discussions about how we fund parks and how the Parks Bureau is structured. I'd like to have a discussion with the citizens about moving to a parks district like the Tualatin Hills district, so that when voters choose to fund a levy, the things that are promised in the levy actually get funded, don't get compressed, and don't get undercut by the general fund portion of the Parks Bureau being taken away for other services. When I first started working in my neighborhood in West Portland Park, there were 0 parks in West Portland Park. There are now 3, and there is about 30 acres of parkland that wasn't publicly owned before the neighborhood association got involved.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz, the next question is for you. There is an ongoing debate about whether Portland has a business-friendly environment. How do you define a business-friendly city, and what would you do as a council member to ensure that Portland is meeting that definition?
You'd have to be an idiot not to know that that supporting businesses in a city like Portland is a core value, that we need good jobs, that we need businesses who are happy to be here and who commit to the values of Portland. I get called a lot of things at OHSU on psychiatry, but being an idiot is not one of them, at least not most of the time. I think that we need to have a more congenial conversation with the business community and with individuals in the business community. Many of the small neighborhood businesses don't feel that some of the larger business alliances speak for them, and we need to have the conversation as to why the Business Alliance consistently says that business is terrible in Portland, that the atmosphere is for Portland businesses is terrible. That doesn't seem like a good marketing strategy, and it's been going on for many years, and we need to figure out why that strategy continues to be chosen and what we can do to fix it.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Well, I've heard the statement that Portland is not a business-friendly city ever since I've been in public office, and I'm not sure we'll ever achieve a day when people actually say we are a business-friendly city, especially if we compare ourselves to cities like Houston or Denver, which are certainly cities we don't want to look like. But nevertheless, we need to focus more of our efforts on helping existing businesses to stay here, to meet their expansion needs. We need to we need to increase the owner's compensation allowance on the city business license tax. It's been fixed at $57,000 and has never changed. It needs to be at least doubled and indexed to inflation. But we need to work hard. It's a common challenge for all of us. We need jobs. We need good-paying jobs. I'm particularly interested in promoting jobs in the sustainable development industry, and that's something I've been working on very hard with the city and the Portland Development Commission.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Saltzman. Mr. Saltzman, there are almost weekly stories about Portland losing families with children to surrounding suburbs. What do you think are the causes of that trend? What are its consequences? And what should the city be doing to reverse it?
Well, one of my priorities is making Portland a family-friendly city and giving every child a shot at success. And it's true, we are losing families, and we need to be working hard at a couple things. We need to have affordable housing that has more than studio and one-bedroom units to them. We need to have family-sized housing. We need to have good schools, which is why, as I said, it's one of the highest priorities for the city government to get involved in supporting our schools. We also need to have early childhood development programs and after-school programs. I think those are things we can offer that our suburban jurisdictions don't offer, and that gives us a drawing card. And finally, it's the livability of our city. Our neighborhoods are very livable, and that's a drawing card. We're doing a good job at attracting seniors who move here to follow their children or grandparents, and good job with the creative class, the 18 to 34-year-olds, but we have to especially target families with children and make sure they stay here to raise their families when they start doing their family rearing.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz, you may respond.
Portland is a wonderful place for families. So if people don't understand that or realize that, then we need to, first of all, point out how wonderful the schools are. If you don't know how wonderful Portland's public schools are, then I would suggest you haven't been in one recently. And we can do a much better job of letting people know the successes as well as the problems. With all the cuts that have happened, it's been difficult for the school boards to know whether to emphasize the cuts or to emphasize the successes. And I think we should do a better job of letting people know how successful our schools and our school children still are. We also need to address affordable housing in terms of not allowing McMansions to be built that cover the entire lot, don't look like the neighborhood, and cut down all of the trees. So there are some specific things we can do in the zoning code that would help address housing costs.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz, the next question is for you. What should the city be doing to support regional growth policies in the face of Measure 37?
I serve on the city's Measure 37 committee, as do some of the folks who are here to support me. We need to have a more in-depth conversation about what Measure 37 really meant and how the city of Portland in particular should be addressing it. I have advocated at council that since the measure said that government will pay for decreased value, that we ought to be having that conversation in certain instances, that there are public benefits to holding the urban growth boundary and to not allowing excessive development in stream corridors and other sensitive areas. So we ought to be doing a better job of looking at what those public benefits are and how the city might be able to pay for those with some version of Robert Liberty's windfall profits taxes is being proposed at Metro, that there's a lot of things that we do in planning that increase people's values, and perhaps there's a way to capture some of that increased value and use it to pay for the folks who are impacted by land use decisions.
Mr. Saltzman?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What should the city be doing to support regional growth policies in the face of Measure 37?
Well, I've served on the Metro Policy Advisory Committee for over 9 years. I'm not on it anymore, but one of the things is really coming together as a region to protect the concepts that we honor, such as having an urban growth boundary where we live and work on one side and where we have farmers and recreation opportunities on the other side. One of the things in particular we need to do is to support our local farming community. So those farms just on the other side of the urban growth boundary can make money by selling their produce to Portland restaurants, at Portland's farmers markets, and so they're not going to be tempted to want to sell or make Measure 37 claims. Otherwise, the City Council so far has not compensated anybody for a Measure 37 claim. We have changed the zoning in 2 cases, and we've rejected many more than we have accepted.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Saltzman. Recent polling by the Portland Schools Foundation and others suggests that the voters do not trust the city to operate efficiently and spend their money properly. What is the reason for this mistrust? Is it well-founded, and what do you propose to do to reinstate public faith in city government?
Well, I think that's I think it's very true that there's a mistrust of city government. I think there's a mistrust of government in general. I happen to believe, I believe in government, and I believe that government can be a constructive force in finding solutions. But nevertheless, we have to work hard to overcome that. The budget processes that we've adopted since Mayor Potter's come into office, I think have been very thorough. We are cutting waste and inefficiencies. We're making changes. We're consolidating. We're having good discussions with the county about consolidating elements of our public safety system to save money. So I think those discussions have to remain, and I regard myself as one of the people who keeps their eye on the bottom line the most and makes sure that government operates efficiently and is accountable. But it's a constant challenge.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz?
The people I talk to feel that decisions are made behind closed doors. They wonder how the decision on the tram was made. They wonder why they're not getting the amount of improvements in the parks bond measure that were promised in the levy. And one of the reasons I see is that elected officials haven't done a good job of explaining to citizens about the levies, about Measure 50, that there is a cap on the amount of property taxes that can be raised, and that when we pass additional levies like the children's levy, that can impact the parks levy and the schools operating levy and all the other ones. We can't just keep adding them on. So if we promise things in a levy and then it gets compressed through because it wasn't planned ahead, citizens have a right to question why they didn't get what they thought they were paying for.
Thank you. The next question is to Ms. Fritz. Ms. Fritz, this week the Oregonian Editorial Board called for Commissioner Saltzman and the rest of City Council to reconsider its contribution to the aerial tram proposed for the South Waterfront development. The Oregonian urged City Council to give up its hardline $3.5 million commitment and instead take on a percentage of the total cost, not to exceed 15%. Do you agree with the editorial board's position? Why or why not?
No, I think we should put the tram on indefinite hold at this point. I served on the Planning Commission when the tram was being proposed. At that point, it was going to cost $9 million, and it saves 9 minutes in the commute time from OHSU to South Waterfront. You can get there in 12 minutes by shuttle bus. The recommendation that the Planning Commission sent to the Council was that there should be additional public process before the tram was approved, that including a thorough examination of the costs and the no-build option. The Council disregarded the Planning Commission's advice, and since then, the costs have gone up and up and up. Nobody has said, we need to stop and reconsider. If it was worth it at $9 million, is it still worth it at $55 million? My answer would be no, it's not. And it would be cheaper to stop because it's going to cost at least $1 million to operate even when it's built. And do we really need the most expensive park and ride in history?
Mr. Saltzman?
Well, I helped structure the tram deal that limits the city's contribution at $3.5 million, and that's where I remain. I do believe the tram should be built. I think OHSU's future is part of Portland's future too. The thousands upon thousands of good-paying jobs it provides, the research OHSU provides that helps find cures for cancer that affect citizens of Portland and citizens throughout the world are important. The services of Dornbecker's Children's Hospital. These are all things that make me glad that OHSU has made its expansion plans in the city of Portland. And we're going to get a brand new neighborhood and an expanded, beautiful Willamette Greenway to boot. But I stay at my current position.
Thank you. During this portion of the program, each candidate will ask 3 questions of the other. Questions must be asked in 30 seconds. The opposing candidate will have 1 minute to respond, after which the questioner will have the option of a 30-second rebuttal. We will alternate between the candidates and begin with Ms. Fritz. Ms. Fritz, could you please ask your first question to Mr. Saltzman?
I'm going to leave the nice one till the end. What do you see as the role of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement in assisting neighborhood associations? And were the neighborhood association chairs valid in their concerns of your restructuring when you were in charge of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement?
Well, I was in charge of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, and I do support a strong, vibrant neighborhood system. And when I was in charge of the neighborhood involvement was the last time a major increase in funding for the neighborhood coalitions occurred, although it's going to happen probably this time in our budget as well. My proposal to restructure the funding situation was very controversial, although I felt we were legally obligated to sort of test the waters and see if other organizations besides neighborhood coalitions could effectively provide the same outreach and support services to neighborhoods that were provided by the coalitions. I realize that's probably one of those areas where I stumbled, but nevertheless, I felt I was doing what was legally required.
Thank you. Ms. Fritz?
Neighborhood associations are the structure that the city funds to help provide citizen involvement. They're not the only structure, but they are the structure that the city primarily funds. And I'm the candidate who knows how they work from the ground up and who knows what studies have been done as to how they can work better and how we can use them to better involve more citizens. So I would not have restructured the Office of Neighborhood Involvement that way, and I will listen and help the system to work better.
Mr. Saltzman, could you please ask your first question to Ms. Fritz?
Sure. While we're on the topic of neighborhoods, at the 2004 Neighborhood Congress, and I don't know if you were there, neighborhood activists recommended that all 96 neighborhoods would send a representative to a newly created body that would have to ratify every city council decision before it becomes law. Do you support that proposal?
I think I was there, and I don't remember that being a firm proposal. I think it was an idea that was discussed. 2004 seems a long time ago. In fact, last September seems a long time ago now. But if it were proposed and if it was, no, I don't. I think that the council is elected to make decisions. Neighborhood associations are participatory, and that's how they should remain. That's what they should be honored for being participatory instead of being representational.
Your rebuttal?
That was clearly their recommendation of the 2004 Congress. I agree with Amanda. I think it's a harebrained idea, frankly. It evokes images of a Roman Senate or a gladiator where the city council would be looking up to the gallery to 96 people that would be going thumbs up or thumbs down every time we make a decision. It's a very clumsy form to govern.
Okay. Ms. Fritz, could you pose your next question to Mr. Saltzman?
Nobody is against funding for impoverished children, and the Children's Initiative of 2002 has certainly funded many worthy programs. In light of the crisis in funding for the public schools in Portland and the compression of property taxes with multiple levies, are you planning to move forward with the Children's Initiative, and what process have you used to be sure that the citizens of Portland are engaged in that decision?
Well, I think the Children's Initiative is something that it does expire. It was a 5-year initiative, and I do intend to seek with my colleagues on the council support for reauthorization for another 5 years. It's been a very effective program. It's invest only in proven programs and nonprofit organizations to expand their capacity to deliver early childhood development services, child abuse prevention services, and after-school and mentoring services. And yes, there will be a conversation about that. There have been conversations going on, and we will have, we are concerned about compression, but that's one of the reasons why we're trying to tackle some of the reforms to the fire, police, disability, and retirement system, because that also compresses parks, children's services, and library services.
You may respond.
In light of the cap of Measure 50, we can't keep passing operating levy after operating levy. And in the next couple of years, we're going to be asked to pass a library levy, a crime prevention levy, the children's levy, perhaps a parks levy, and something else that I'm currently blanking on. And the green spaces measure, which is over the cap because it's a capital expenditure rather than operating expenses. We can't fund all those things. So we need to have a conversation, a broad conversation with citizens about what the priorities are, how much we can afford for each of those things. And that has to happen before we put one or two of them on the ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman, your next question to Ms. Fritz.
The City Club, as was mentioned, recently published a report entitled FPD&R, It's Time for Change. The strong recommendations of this report essentially mirror those of the independent review committee that I established. And I noticed we were both here at the City Club meeting when there was a unanimous vote to endorse that report, but I didn't see you raise your hand for or against the recommendations. So I was wondering why you didn't vote, and more to the point, what is your position on the City Club's recommendations? Do you support them or not?
I'm not a member of the City Club, so I'm therefore not allowed to vote, is the answer to that question. I support the City Club's recommendations, which actually go much further than the independent review committees, much of them are in step. With the concern I have, one of the concerns I have is the proposal to ask new employees to pick up their own 6% contribution to PERS, if the state retirement system, if we were to move to that. The unions bargained in 1989 when they went to the current system. They gave up 2% pay increases in each of 3 years in order to get the 6% pickup by the employer. And all other city unions get the 6% pickup. So by putting that on the table at the beginning of bargaining, that's essentially saying that's a 6% cut in the fire and police pay for new employees. Shouldn't be part of the discussion about the retirement and disability. It should be, if we're not paying the same as the current rates compared with other jurisdictions, that's another question. It's not part of retirement and disability.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Well, I will note that the city's independent review committee did recommend that the city pick up that 6% share. And I would just say to the membership committee, here's a ripe candidate to join the City Club.
Mr. Fritz, Ms. Fritz, excuse me, your last question to Mr. Saltzman.
One of my favorite things about this campaign is that it has so far been a positive campaign, and I'm hoping it will remain that way. And perhaps one of the reasons for that is that both Commissioner Saltzman and I have a sophomore daughter at Wilson High School. So my question to you, Commissioner, is what is your favorite thing about Wilson High School? And secondly, what is your favorite thing about Jefferson High School?
Well, I think my favorite thing about Wilson High School is that it's very close to where I live. It provides a great education, and my daughter is doing very well in sports as well, so I think it's a great school. My favorite, Jefferson is in need of a lot of help, but certainly they have carved out and established. They have a strong, loyal background of people who have gone to Jefferson. There's a strong commitment by all of us to make Jefferson improve. It's got to improve its academic performance, but certainly its performing arts programs are second to none in the Portland Public School system.
Ms. Fritz?
I, too, enjoy the extracurricular programs at Wilson. My sons have been involved in football and basketball, and my daughter swims and does drama, which is funded currently by the parents at Wilson because it's not funded by the school district. And it's a community where people do pitch in and help. My favorite thing about Jefferson is their academic success and some of the things that their teachers and their students are doing. If you heard their students testifying at the school board in defending against the school board's proposal, there isn't a debate team in this state that could have done a better job, whether at a public or private school, whether Lincoln, Wilson, wherever. I was so impressed that they are turning out great students and they are doing a great job.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman, your last question of Ms. Fritz.
Amanda, I took notice in a recent Willamette Week interview with you that you think I'm doing a good job. I was wondering if you would elaborate.
You are doing a good job, and that's one of the reasons, again, that I wanted to run, because I think one of the problems we have in politics and the reasons that people like me don't run is because it's a blood sport most of the time, and that you have to act argumentative and do negative polling and various things like that. I want it to be a more positive experience. Good enough maybe isn't the direction that Portland wants to go in, and I have skills that are different from yours. Our backgrounds are similar in environment. Yours is environmental engineering. I'm more of a biologist. And we live in Southwest. So there's things that I can offer that I feel that would expand the diversity on the council.
Mr. Saltzman?
I accept her reasons for supporting me. Or thinking I'm doing a good job, I'm sorry. I think I'm doing a good job.
Okay. We're now moving to that final portion of the program, 3-minute closing statements from each candidate. We will begin with Amanda Fritz.
We are at a turning point in Portland's history, and I am uniquely qualified to help lead the way down the right road. The elections on May 16th are the dawn of a new day in Portland, with voter-owned elections taking power from affluent donors, returning it to all citizens. The struggle goes beyond that. Portland is at a turning point on many fronts. For the first time since Measure 5 passed in 1990, the citizens of Portland aren't even going to be asked to approve additional funding for our school districts because polls and common knowledge indicate such a request would fail. The finest urban school districts in the country are once more teetering on the abyss of decline from which there will be no return, and the community lacks the cohesion to make the right decisions. And the reason for that is that citizens feel left out of government, and they aren't given important information in ways and means that they can understand. They don't feel included in planning and decision making. I was the leading voice for neighborhood and environmental concerns on the Planning Commission. With Ernie Bonner, I helped send that recommendation that the OHSU tram should not be approved without additional study and public process. Council's decision in 2002 to approve it was a turning point at which they chose the wrong fork in the road. And citizens wonder why and how that decision and others like it are made. Building parking garages in the historic Alphabet District in Northwest, planning to cover the Mount Tabor reservoirs without seeking public input or responding to it, and then making the city look ridiculous by attempting to sell the covers on eBay and not even doing that right. These are examples of decisions I would make in a different way, being more responsive to neighbors who know most about their community. I am the only candidate in this race who is endorsed by the Democratic Party of Multnomah County. I'm endorsed by unions, by elected officials, by hundreds of neighbors concerned about the community, sustainability, parks, planning, and environmental protection. I am not the candidate of special interests. I am the candidate with broad support from many people who have not previously felt welcome to the table. I'm running to bring new energy and vitality to those who've built Portland to be the great city that we are. All of us are needed to help make the right choices at this turning point in history. And at my tables, you see some folks who are not necessarily always here at the City Club, and I'm glad that they're here supporting me today. Thank you for coming. I will lead the way along the road of effective citizen participation in decision-making. I will lead the way to partnerships between the city and its citizens. I am leading the way to a new trust in government by succeeding in the voter-owned election system, actually it's a revolution, and by making choices based on my experience as a nurse, mother, neighborhood activist, planning commissioner, and Portlander. I would be honored to earn your vote on May 16th.
Mr. Saltzman?
Over the course of this debate, I hope you got a sense for some of my passions. Protecting children. When a child is trapped in their own private hell of abuse or neglect, saving them all is all of our work. I've worked hard to make Portland a family-friendly city, including doing what it takes to protect and improve our schools and trying to level the playing field for those who struggle to succeed. I believe deeply in the importance of moving to a sustainable future that protects the environment while establishing Portland as the national leader in this emerging sector of the economy. And I've continued to plug away at the hard and sometimes unglamorous work of making government work better and more accountably. Sometimes that requires raising uncomfortable questions. I'm willing to keep right on doing that. But I'd like to close on where we are going as a community and how we can get there. I see a future that is focused on people and a city that offers people a sense of place. Healthy, successful families able to make choices from a diverse menu of neighborhoods and livelihoods. I see a Portland that finds the way to blend the incredible changes of our times with an enduring respect for unchanging human values. I believe in the role of government in helping to achieve this. Serving this great community has given me perspective on governing. I can be pretty driven. I've stumbled on occasion. I've learned. But I also have an abiding respect for the idea of balance. Unfortunately, we live in absolutist times. I hope we can resist that trend in our city government. Beware of those who say that the answer is to listen only to the neighborhood associations or only to the business community. Question those who think that essential choices we face is between changing nothing and changing everything. Push back on those who remain so focused on ideology or a belief system that they cannot brook dissent. We are in this together. We must not succumb to the temptation to go to our separate corners. It may be shocking that a charismatic firebrand like myself would stand up for a balanced approach. Usually we leave the touchy-feely stuff to Randy Leonard. But given the tone and tenor of politics these days, I am a proud contrarian. I would like to finish this debate the same way I began, thanking the City Club, Amanda Fritz, Lucinda Tate, for your civic engagement and commitment to continuing and improving the experiment that is Portland. And I would very much be honored to have your support on May 16th. Thank you very much.
Our candidates for a very positive debate. Special thanks to you, Susan, for moderating, and to our panelists. And thanks to all of you for being here, and we're adjourned.